Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By accumulating merit and wisdom through generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. I pay homage to the sublime Mother of the victorious ones of the three times, the inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, which is unborn, unceasing, and of the nature of space, and which is the object of realization of the self-knowing primordial wisdom. Okay. Now, two things to remember. Two things. Maybe three. Oh, four. Now, a few things to remember. One is to speak slower. Yes. I mean, if anyone likes to, you could just do this with your hand. I used to have a friend who would always sit in the, well, I still have that friend, but she's no longer here, who would always do this in the front of the class. The moment I got too fast, Gila, she would kind of very subtly kind of gesture that I should slow down. That I have to remember. Secondly, I have to remember to check online the messages that sometimes arrive in the discussion group. I keep forgetting that. And to repeat the question. Someone said last time to repeat it. Oh, thank you. And even apologize. No, I should apologize to them that I didn't repeat the question. So yeah, sorry. I almost brought a piece of paper and just wrote it all in front of me. That is because one of my teachers, Geshe Thupten Desang, when he still did the review classes, when after His Holiness gave teachings, I translated for him, and at that time the translation was simultaneous. Yeah. So simultaneous translation is great because you don't have to remember much, you don't have to write quickly to check it. But if they talk very, very fast, it's very difficult because, yeah, of course, it's very hard. I mean, it's a little longer to translate things into English, and you kind of just miss out on certain things. So I ask him, please speak slowly. But this is one of the hardest things to ask someone. If they talk fast, it's not, at some point they become faster again. But he put a piece of paper in front of him. Don't speak too fast. And he didn't. He kept looking at it and he kept remembering. And yeah, he did a great job. I was able to follow. But going back to the discussion group, Bernd put something in the discussion group last time. I didn't understand everything he said. And he actually answered his own question, so no need to answer the question. But something came to mind in relation to what he said. So what he basically said was that if a Prasangika schools, and I may misquote him here, but that's how I understood what he said. If the Prasangika school says that an arhat is merely designated in dependence upon a basis of designation, and then we say that two persons here, so heroes and solitary realizers, I suppose he's talking about, are both arhats, right? It is not enough merely to show that it is not enough merely to show that the same word or label arhat is applied to both. That's not enough, just saying they're both called arhat. One must also establish that the basis upon which the label is imputed is the same. And I was like, he used identical, so he used the same. That the basis of imputation, if I call two practitioners arhats, then the basis of imputation must be the same, or not.
Individual.
Okay, I call these two, this table and that table over there. I don't think he means literally the same, but I think I know what he means. I mean, the basis of imputation has to be given. Like for an arhat, we decide what an arhat is. That's the thing. That's the thing. When we label, we're not randomly just calling things anything. We talk about conventions. Now, for instance, when we say, what is a snake? Okay, a snake is a living being. A snake is a living being. It has certain characteristics. I mean, it's difficult to define, really. Define something that is exactly a snake and not something else. With some things, it's easier than with other things, like a table. Define a table. It's a little harder, actually, right? Anyway, I'm not going to get into that. But, you know, if you define a table, in the end, you could say, well, you know, someone sitting down, sitting in a certain way, or you know, on their hands and feet, and you put something on top of them, is that a table or not? Even without getting into that. So what makes a table a table? We have certain conventions, and based on that, we now call things table, chairs, and so forth. So it's not random. The basis of imputation needs to have these characteristics, right? Only then do I call it a table. We have a lot of discussion on that. How do we learn language? If I learn what a table is, I don't need someone to tell me every time. So you connect the two. This is part of Loric. We talk about like a concept of something, a meaning generality, as it's also called. Like if I talk about a table and I ask you to think about a table, something comes to mind. What a table means to you. Right? Yeah, well, your breakfast, the breakfast you had this morning. So I ask you, remember your breakfast. And I'm pretty sure everyone remembers something different. Of course, obviously, I don't think you all ate the same thing. Think of a car. I could ask you, which color has the car that you think of? Who chose red? Who chose, yeah, most people apparently, mine is always red. But, anyway, so, you know, different colors appear to mind. So what it is we mean with color, a concept or like a generic image arises to the mind. And if we don't know the word for a car yet, okay, so I can't give you the instruction, think of a car, because you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So if I say, think of a car, you're not going to do it. But if you think about a car anyway, and then I say, are you thinking about a car? And you don't know what the word car means, nothing is going to happen. Or if I just say car to you, if I use the word car, then what appears to you is a sound generality or word generality of the word. So in other words, you hear whatever that word is, like the way it sounds to you, that appears to your mind. Just the word car. But when you know those two are connected, car and the actual object, that you can actually call this object a car, then both of those appear to your mind. The word generality of car and the meaning generality, what a car means to you. They appear as mixed, which is interesting because this is very much Loric actually. But anyway, this is interesting because when I ask you, especially when you're bilingual, those of you who are bilingual, if I ask you, are you thinking right now in a particular language? If you're not bilingual, you probably always think in the same language, and you may not actually be aware that you do. I don't think we always think in a particular language. Sometimes I think we just have images of things, we don't even use words. In particular, when you're bilingual, you may notice that you sometimes think about the same thing in one of the two languages. Sometimes, I don't know, in English and sometimes in another language. I know that from my own experience because we debated so much. And then when I went home after 4 hours debating in Tibetan, it went on and on. You know, my mind was rotating, it was going round and round about different topics. I was thinking about a lot of the same topics over and over, but it was usually in Tibetan. And then someone, I don't know, called and I spoke to them in English and I switched into English. My thoughts switched into that language. So it always depends. When I spent a lot of time with my mom, of course, I'm thinking in German. So we think in a particular language, actually. That was also one way I learned Tibetan, because my Tibetan was so appalling, and we didn't have any books at that time, and Tibetans, it was new to them to teach Westerners, so they were very confused if I said something. They had no idea what I was saying, and I didn't know what they were saying, so they just kind of quietly left. And I had a hard time to find a conversation partner. So I thought, okay, I'm just gonna think in Tibetan. That was difficult first, like I have to go to the, what was that word again? To look at, couldn't finish my thought. But that was quite helpful, actually, to force myself to think in that language. But the point is that it does influence our thoughts, first of all. I mean, if you think in Tibetan, if you think in a certain language, you think differently than you would if you speak, think in a different language, just as we think differently when we speak that language. Anyway, so there's this incredibly fascinating connection between sounds and the meaning of these sounds. And every time we take something to mind, we actually label. We don't always have to label with words. We can also just label with the image. Every time I think car, without actually thinking of the word car mixed with the actual car, every time I think car, I label. But I'm not just going around car, snake, house. No, of course, as we all know, I'm thinking of myself most of the time. I, me, and mine is much more present in my thoughts than cars and tables, unless they relate to me and mine. So it's I and me and mine. And we constantly reinforce, for instance, our sense of identity. I'm like this, I'm like that, and so forth. This is how our sense of identity develops, but also that it's also maintained. But it all makes sense that, okay, on one hand, it's just labeled. I'm a sister, independence on my siblings. I'm a daughter, independence on my parents. So it's in relation to that, I use these concepts. I think about these concepts and I keep labeling, and that's part of my identity. Having said all that, so labeling is responsible for who we are and so forth. It's not random. I don't think of myself as a sister. I wouldn't if I was, a single child, if I didn't have siblings. If I was an only child. So I wouldn't apply that kind of label. But now, having said all this, having brought label into the discussion, now the question is, if I label this table and that table, I both label them table. Are they the same table? Do they have the same basis of interpretation? No, right? No, they share some commonality, but actually they're very different. That which is the characteristic of the left table is not the characteristic of the right table, and vice versa, right? It goes both ways. One of my teachers, he explained this in a very interesting way. Remember the guy jumping out of a plane? Yeah. So he talked about someone jumping out of a plane. Let's say that plane is about 3-4 kilometers up in the air, 4,000 meters up in the air. Before the person hits the ground, they probably have some time, right? I don't know how fast it is, but maybe a minute or two. So as they're falling, we're talking about them as falling, right? A person is falling off a plane. In each moment, they're in a different place. None of these moments is the same. None of these moments is different from moment to moment. So they're in a different spot. They get closer to the ground, further away from the plane. But still we talk about them falling. That idea is very interesting, of course, when I apply I to myself. Each moment the I is different. Each moment is different, but I can still refer to myself as, Kelsang Wangmo. Until I die and I'm reborn as a cow, I don't think anyone is going to name me Kelsang Wangmo. I'll be maybe Daisy or something. But up to that point, right, up to the point I die, every moment is different. But I can still refer to myself as Casamance, right? Okay, but the problem with this, calling myself Casamance from moment to moment, may actually suggest to me that I don't change. Or calling something mountain, or calling something sun, or I don't know, calling someone Venerable Kumpen, because I refer to her as Venerable Kumpen all the time, and because I refer to her with the same term, that is not changing, that I use the same term. There is a danger that I perceive of her or of the mountain or of myself as permanent. We don't blame the term for that. We have already a tendency, because we perceive things as intrinsically, as concrete and substantially existent, which would actually mean they're permanent. Therefore, if we perceive phenomena to exist intrinsically, we usually also perceive them to exist as permanent, as permanent entities. So there's that. But not just that, we may even see in these two tables, we see them as the same. Now, I've used a continuum with each moment being different, similar to the guy who's jumping off the plane or falling to the ground. Each moment is different, just as each moment of the eye is different. But also two objects. They're not the same, actually. And I still call them the same. And because I use the same word, I'm likely to see them as being the same. Can you see the danger of that? What could that give rise to?
Because we have some expectations towards them.
We have some expectation towards them. Okay. If table 1 performs a certain function, I expect now table number 2 to do the same. What about people? What about people? If we give the same description to one person, and then we give it to another person, and we believe that they're the same, therefore, what could that give rise to? Racism. Racism, right? So you have, I don't know, you perceive someone, you label them with, I don't know, whatever you label them with, Asian or European or whatever. And then one person who I've labeled European behaves in a certain way. Okay, so that's the European person. I give the same label to someone else and now I expect them to be just like that. That generalization. So on one hand, language simplifies our reality because it enables us to categorize things, to reflect on them, to see similarities and therefore categorize them. We make sense of the world. It's very, very helpful. On the other hand, because of our sense of intrinsic existence and our sense of things being permanent, etc., and our tendency to generalize, then these things happen. To generalize, I mean, it doesn't have a good connotation. I mean, that's not a word that has a positive. Don't generalize. But we keep doing that. So I think it's important to realize that if I call two people, let's say Asian or European and so forth, that we cannot generalize. I mean, yes, they have something in common, being European, but then of course we have something in common being human being. And so in that way, not to kind of ostracize people or to generalize in the sense of being racist and so forth. Or judgmental, yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that it came up because, well, understanding labeling better and understanding that the label is totally subjective, but we now believe it to be something within the person, that's the problem, right? Because when we have racist ideas or biased kind of ideas in terms of people's background and so forth, we believe there's something within them. Not just I apply that label in relation to, I don't know, their citizenship really, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying that there are not sometimes similarities. Of course there are, but that's no reason for states of mind such as racism. Okay, all right. I just wanted to, and that's really not what Bernd is saying. And I think I understood what he said. Absolutely. And anyway, he answered his question. I don't know how he did, but it's fine. Yeah. Oh, there he is. If you hear one, you might have a word generality. If you hear words, but you do not really listen. Oh. All right. If you hear words, but don't. If you hear words, but you do not really listen, does your mind have a word generality? I think so. If you just hear the words and you're not thinking about the meaning, just the word generality appears, especially if it's in a foreign language you don't understand. But you may just hear the words, but it doesn't, it's possible, isn't it? Unless you have an appearance of the actual thing itself. Yeah, maybe. And so Rika asked a very difficult question. There she is right away, asking the most difficult questions. Why are the meaning generalities permanent? Yeah. Yep. Very difficult. Why are these meaning generalities permanent? If I think of car, I mean, think of it. It's kind of frozen in space. It's not a vibrant thing that has arisen from causes and my mind just has this thing appear to it. Of course, through that appearance, I can get at the car and think about it. It's very useful. But actually, it's just this appearance that doesn't need to change moment by moment. I mean, of course, if I ask you to think of a person running a race, it's not going to be frozen in space. But it's just the movements of the legs. It's not like their blood is flowing and their heart is beating. Unless I think about it, it's not even appearing to me. So the way even this athlete is appearing by way of this meaning generality, it's permanent because it doesn't need to, it's only just an exclusion of everything that is not that running athlete, right? Just the main characteristics of that athlete, they appear, but not all the other details that are constantly changing. So how could that be changing? It could change over time. Let's say, you know, today I think of a car and it appears red and tomorrow it's blue, but that is not a momentary change. It's still a static thing. If I think of my mom, just that there's just the static appearance in a certain situation and that's it. So that's why. Oh, and so Bernd is saying the problem is that in debate, labeling happens in two persons. Is he saying that two people are labeling? Okay, he's actually, there is something like that. They do talk about that. That's going to be part of this text. Is there a subject that we both have in common? If we debate with each other, we both cite a subject, but we see it totally differently. Are we actually really debating? Right? If I believe that subject exists inherently and you believe it doesn't exist inherently, there's a bit of a difficulty. We have to make sure, and Alan actually, he brought it up. He talked about that. Like, if you think of the same thing differently, you don't agree on the definition, you're not really debating. I mean, you can't effectively debate with each other. And that's so true, absolutely. That's why we first have to establish we have the same basis. Will you see the same thing always in the same way? No, not at all. I mean, but it's close enough that you can learn from each other. Right? Okay. But isn't the appearance dependent on the cause that my mind has experienced a car before? It is dependent on that, and it happens to be a cause, but just because something is dependent on something as a cause doesn't make it impermanent. For instance, the lack of Donald Trump on my table. All right, the absence of Donald Trump on my table. It's dependent on Donald Trump, you could say, I mean, for me to understand it, or it's also dependent on the table. It's dependent on that, but that doesn't make that absence impermanent. There's not like an impermanent absence from moment to moment, slightly different, it's changing. It's this flexible. I know it's ridiculous to say Donald Trump. The reason I'm saying it, because in the past I've said absence of monkey on the table, and someone would say, well, what about an invisible monkey? You don't know. And I didn't want to get into that. So I used someone, it can only be him, he's not invisible. So, well, it used to be Obama, now it's Trump. So the absence of Trump on my table, it depends on the table. It depends on impermanent things that happen to be causes, but still, it's just the absence of him here, right? Him there in this part. So likewise, an appearance to the mind, yes, it's dependent on me having seen a car, but when the car appears, it's just a negation of all the characteristics of anything that does not fulfill the characteristics that I associate with a car. Right? What do I associate with the car? I'm not an expert. I'm not thinking of the engine, not at all. I'm thinking of a pretty kind of car that I would think is pretty, probably not very practical. So anyway, depending on who you are, what you associate with a car in that moment, so that appears, but by way of the absence of anything that is that characteristic. Right? In the same way, when I think of the absence of Trump on this table, it's just a negation of that person. It's not a non-static thing that's fluctuating, changing moment by moment. Right? Okay. Anyway, I did it again. Do a lot of, but I still want to give you more information just about some other things that I believe are important in context. And well, there was something in the group that gave me the opportunity to do so. All right, now I've already added some new material. Let's go back to the last bit, the second reasoning. I don't think I'll spend that much time on it. I'll go through it quite quickly because I want to start with this very important concept or very important idea. What comes first? What do you realize first? The lack of intrinsic existence of a person, or the lack of intrinsic existence of something other than person? Now, please, no sneak peek, because I've given one answer in here, but I want you to think, by yourself. What do you think? We'll go through it in class. Usually I ask you to read in advance, but in this case, I'd rather have you answer it yourself. What do you think? What goes first? But let me just finish that first part, and then, we'll get to it. So the second reasoning, again, this argument can be summarized. Oh, no, sorry. What page are we on? We are on page 163. Sorry, I did jump a little bit. So having said everything we did so far, the kind of reasoning that was presented, the whole analysis, is it a correct consequence or not? Well, we can go through a little faster now. The text then proceeds with the second reasoning. I'll just read what Lama Tsongkhapa says. So the commentary statement that otherwise, like non-Buddhist seers, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, would not have eliminated all the afflictions pertaining to the three realms along with their seeds, indicates that if Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas have not familiarized themselves with emptiness, by perfectly realizing it, they will not have destroyed the seeds of afflictions, and their path will resemble the mundane path that views the realms of existence in comparative terms of fine and coarse. All right, I know this is difficult to understand. So actually, what is Lama Tsongkhapa arguing here? He's saying, let's face it, you have to realize emptiness in order to become liberated. There is just no way around it. And not just emptiness, the lack of intrinsic existence. That's the whole argument. And the kind of argument given here, the reasoning given here, I don't think we can expect someone to go, I accept that right away. This is a process. It goes through the entire text. Establishing first the lack of intrinsic existence. There's going to be so much on emptiness, so no worries, directly and indirectly on emptiness. But this is just an introduction saying it would be so absurd if you don't realize emptiness. How can you become liberated? And emptiness here, of course, from the point of view of the Prasangika school. Okay, anyway, Acharya Chandrakirti's auto-commentary is cited in this passage. Actually, what it does, so here Lama Tsongkhapa quotes Acharya Chandrakirti's auto-commentary on Entering the Middle Way, the main text we're studying. So he cites it in this passage and draws an analogy with the mundane path of seers. We had that word before. So those practitioners They're really amazing. It's so fascinating that this is even possible. We've never heard about that in the West. I mean, we hear so much about what's possible to do using our mind. But this is something truly amazing. It's actually not in a Buddhist context that this is talked about. In India, a lot of philosophers, a lot of spiritual beings, they know about it. Here it's talking about a particular capacity of overcoming the afflictions. Without using Buddhist means, there is a way to temporarily overcome afflictions. It's just temporary. But when I say temporary, I'm not saying a few seconds, a few hours, or even a few months, for a few years or longer. It's actually possible to do that. But Buddhists are not that enthusiastic about it. They use it as an analogy, but they don't encourage it, because even if it's 10 lifetimes, no afflictions, they come back. So you don't actually get rid of them, but you do temporarily suppress, or suppress is not a good word, because suppress means they come up stronger. That's not what it means. But temporarily, they're gone. Can we temporarily kind of eliminate some of our afflictions? Yes. You don't need to do these meditations that are described here. They're even more effective. But we can, even through an analytical meditation, through setting our mind, I'm not going to get angry now. I'm not going to get angry. That's the power of the mind. In such a way, you can set your mind, similar to say, I'm going to wake up at 4, I'm going to wake up at 4, right? Without setting your alarm clock. You can set your mind, I'm not going to get angry. I'm not, like New Year's resolutions, I'm not going to eat sugar. I'm not going to eat sugar. And you're much less likely the moment someone offers you a biscuit to go, oh yeah, I want 3, right? It's just the power of the mind, dependent on your determination. So that is possible. But here, they use something even more effective, which are certain mundane paths. And Acharya Chandrakirti indicates that although these mundane paths, so there's certain mundane paths, as they're called, mundane in the sense that they're not super mundane kind of meditations on emptiness, but they're actually just ordinary, as they call them, meditations where you attain a very high level of meditative absorption and can temporarily abandon attachment to all levels of cyclic existence except the highest level of cyclic existence. We don't even know about the different levels, right? If I were to ask you, quote the different, give me the names of the different, we don't know. It's not usually encouraged to memorize it. We have to memorize it as part of our study because it comes up in the exams, but it's not like, oh, it's that important to know. We all know peak of cyclic existence. That one we all remember. So there are just many different levels of existence in this world where we can be reborn in. It seems totally like, oh my God, that's... But I keep saying the Charvakas, the non-Buddhist school of the Charvakas, there's a school that's called the hedonist school, hedonist school. They say that's all rubbish. Why? Because you can't see it. They say, no, there is no rebirth, there's no other realms of existence. And what's the argument? Can't see it. And I keep saying, we live in a world, the 21st century is the century of the Charvakas, the hedonists. I mean, in this world, we don't believe in reincarnation. Science hasn't proven it yet. We go as far as saying science has proven that it doesn't exist. Not understanding, not being able to prove the existence of something is not the same as proving that it doesn't exist. Huge distinction. Not being able to prove the existence of something is not equal to proving the non-existence of it. So, anyway, let's keep that open. Reincarnation, that's already difficult enough. In the 20th century, why do we have such a hard time? Because we think the mind is the brain. I mean, we even talk like that. My brain couldn't understand it. My brain had a hard time. My brain got angry. As if brain and mind were the same thing. Very much connected, of course, no question, but not the same. The brain is not experiencing. And anyway, with modern science, fortunately, we have fascinating situations where people are, I don't know, undergoing surgery, undergoing anesthesia. What is it called? Is that the right word? Anesthesia, right? So, and then they talk about, I heard one story, I think I shared it with you, of a woman who was under, how do you put that in English? Under anesthesia, right? So she was asleep. I mean, to all other people, she was out. She was
Nice. What is it?
Anesthetized.
anesthetized. I knew there was a fancy word. Anesthetized. She was anesthetized. And so she actually left her body, apparently, and was able to leave her. She was very much conscious, but not in her body. So the way it went was like she went out of her room and saw her sister, or witnessed her sister talking to a doctor. And the doctor had a stain on his tie. Anyway, so she kept looking at the tie and at the doctor, overhearing what they were talking about. And then when she woke up, she said to her sister, well, you talked about such and such. And the sister was like, oh, no way, you heard that. She didn't believe it, but she knew exactly what they talked about. And so her sister was like, yeah, right, you're just, pulling my leg. But then she said, ask the doctor and asking about the stain on his tie. And then the sister went there, she had noticed it, and she was like, oh yeah, I had a stain on my tie. So then they were like, ooh, that's spooky. But from a Buddhist point of view, that's not a big deal, because our mind, our subtle mind, not our coarse mind, not the mind that is active right now, that cannot be without the brain. But when you're anesthetized, am I saying it right? Then a subtler mind becomes active. The coarser mind is temporarily not active, and then the mind can leave. It doesn't have to depend on the brain. It can actually leave the body. Yeah, so there's some fascinating stories that, in particular, by people who undergo surgery and have the craziest experiences, seeing the whole surgery from the top. Seeing things that they couldn't see if they had opened their eyes during the surgery because they had the wrong perspective.
But normally people don't ordinary people do this? They leave their body even having no anesthetized mind? they practice it to leave the body and come back, no?
Do they? Ordinary people do that? Practice that? Oh, I've never practiced that. Yeah, you have done that? You've left your body? Where did you go? Wow! No. Sorry, you don't need to talk about. But
No,
that's
you can talk
interesting.
with it. So yeah, so in
Repeat the question. Sorry, I have to repeat the question. So Doris said that there are ordinary people who actually leave their bodies. So I've not heard of that, but amazing. Go ahead. Yeah, Craig.
Yeah. So if, say for example, I'm doing a session online with people, some like energy work, then we can create a third space, where everybody goes, and their energy is there, their body is where they are, and then I work that way.
Great. Now these examples are great, where you do like energy works and you kind of focus on being in a certain place. The body is in a different place, and you get there. The best thing is to just do this. I mean, make sure you get back, but no. But the thing is, like, the best thing is to just try it out, or to read more about it, hear more about it. That already allows the possibility of your brain existing separate from your mind. And from there, it would also make sense that even though your brain is dead at the time of death, then there are possibilities of thinking of the meditators who are dead. I mean, if you have the chance to see one of those meditators in the meditative absorption after death. I had the good fortune that, I didn't have the good fortune that one of my teachers died, passed away. But when he passed away, he was so advanced, he stayed in that meditation for a week. And it was monsoon. It was really hot and humid. I mean, if it had been me, I'd be smelly after a day. But after a week, no smell, no decay. And he was definitely dead. I mean, you can't hold your breath for that long. I mean, I watched it because we had to do pujas. We had to do pujas near him, and I was like, okay, do I detect any slight movement? I was so fascinated. I believed it, but it was more intellectual. But when I saw it, it was like, he was dead. He was 100% dead, but he didn't decay. So that is something else. Again, wow, the brain is definitely, was brain dead. There was no blood circulation and so forth. Unfortunately, there are documentaries about this now. You can actually see it. And then you take it further, reincarnation. Okay, that's possible. Your body, your mind can leave, your body can continue on. Why not other planes of existence? Why not? Right? Just because we don't see them, that people are reborn. I mean, people are reborn as tiny little insects we can't even see with our bare eyes. Why not being reborn in states? And so on. So you see how the kind of logic goes from there. Okay, having said all that, so let's say there's states you can reborn in after you pass away, that states you can be reborn in that are even greater than our desire realm. We're in the desire realm. We're the worst. We're in the worst place in terms of, as the word says, we're in a place where desire rules. And it's true, isn't it? Look around. Advertisements and all that. Really desire rules. More than any time in the past, I suppose. So think you can be reborn in a state that is not the result of desire, but the result of very advanced meditative states. Because what we are in, our reality, is a reflection of our own mind. You'll know that Buddhist saying, I suppose. If you want to know what your mind was like in the past, look at your present situation. If you want to know what your situation will be in the future, look at your present mind. Right? So therefore, if your mind has that capacity, like high levels of meditative absorption, you can actually temporarily abandon attachment first to the desire realm and be reborn in what's called the fast concentration level. And then keeping that single-pointed focus, focusing on, well, first the disadvantages of the desire realm and the advantages of the first concentration realm, you're reborn there. So through seeing the disadvantages of the desire realm, you basically are able to distance your mind from it. And instead are reborn in that first level. And so you can eradicate, in order to be able to be reborn in that first level, you have to temporarily get rid of the afflictions that would otherwise be responsible for being reborn in our next life in the desire realm. They're temporarily eliminated with these meditations. That's what happens. So therefore, but what they do is they eradicate these afflictions temporarily, but not the underlying seeds of the afflictions, and therefore do not eliminate the potential for those afflictions to arise again. That's their shortcoming, their drawback. But we're always talking about them as drawbacks, but actually, I think they're incredible. If you really imagine this, what the mind can do, unbelievable. And this is what's been done in India for thousands of years. We just don't know about it, unfortunately. So their practice consists of evaluating the realms of existence in relative terms of coarse and peaceful. So first they see the desire realm as coarse, the first concentration level as peaceful. And then as a result of that, they're reborn there. And then they continue. They kind of make their way up. The only place they cannot go beyond is peak of existence, because there's no samsaric place that is higher than that. So by just thinking, oh, liberation is great, hoping to be liberated is not going to happen, because beyond peak of existence, peak of cyclic existence is only liberation. And these meditations will not take us to liberation. Right? So their practice consists of evaluating the realms of existence in relative terms of coarse and peaceful, leading only to rebirth in higher states within samsara, unfortunately. As I noted above, this is accomplished at the very least by regarding the desire realm as coarse and thereby temporarily overcoming attachment to it. So through this incredible concentration and regarding as something undesirable, as something negative, you are able to overcome any desire to the desire realm, desire for the desire realm. In particular, so attachment to it, in order to be reborn in one of the higher states of samsaric existence, which are perceived as peaceful or refined. The sole exception, as I just said, is the peak of existence, since there's no further samsaric level above that level that could be regarded as more peaceful and thus serve as a basis for abandoning manifest attachment to the peak of existence. Beyond this highest level of samsara lies liberation itself, which unfortunately cannot be attained through a temporary cessation at the manifest level of attachment. Okay, so this is still page 163. I try to also remember giving the page numbers. By invoking this comparison, the auto-commentary, so Acharya Chandrakirti, in his auto-commentary on entering the middle way, he argues what would follow if hearers and solitary realizers did not attain the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness. Without such a supermundane path, they too would be unable to eliminate the root cause of samsara, the ignorance grasping at intrinsic existence, and would therefore fail to irrevocably destroy the seeds of the afflictions. Their path would then be no different in kind from that of non-Buddhist seers who temporarily overcome various forms of attachment without eliminating them at the root. Okay, so to formulate this argument in a kind of logical consequence, in a structured consequence, which constitutes the second of the three reasonings. So take the subject, a hearer or solitary realizer arhat. It follows that they have not eliminated all the mental afflictions pertaining to the three realms of cyclic existence. So they cannot eliminate the afflictions, in other words, because they have not attained the realization of the absence of intrinsic existence. So here, Acharya Chandrakirti is basically arguing, not only are you surpassed by a bodhisattva on the first ground, never mind about that. Most importantly, you don't get rid of all the baggage. You don't get rid of all the afflictions. No way. You can temporarily suppress some of the afflictions, as we'll hear later, by realizing the coarse type of selflessness. There's a coarse type of selflessness. Pardon?
The coarse selflessness is the self-sufficiency.
Yeah. I wish it was a little easier to say it. The absence of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. So that absence of just an owner of mind and body. When you realize that, you can already temporarily suppress some afflictions. That is possible. But that's similar to the kind of mundane absorptions that are mentioned here. So, for example, therefore, like a non-Buddhist seer, like one of these practitioners who has attained the mundane path, which view the various levels of samsaric existence in comparative terms of peacefulness and coarseness. All right, so as in the case with the first reasoning, the second likewise raises the question of whether it qualifies as a correct consequence, and if so, calls for an examination of its intended addressee among the Buddhist tenet holders. Okay, same idea. I'll just quickly go through this. I mean, I've given some basic information, but I didn't go through the debate this time, because the debate is pretty much the same. Since the person to whom the consequence is directed is subject to direct contradiction with respect to the three spheres, they must accept the following three positions. A hearer, solitary realizer, arhat, is someone who's not realized the absence of intrinsic existence. Then the pervasion is established. Whoever has not realized the absence of intrinsic existence has necessarily not eliminated all the mental afflictions pertaining to the three realms. And a hearer or solitary realizer has eliminated all the afflictions pertaining to the three realms. Okay, so you can definitely see the contradiction in here, especially with the pervasion, especially with number 2 and number 3. And the Buddhist tenet holders who do not follow the Prasangika school, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, Madhyamika, Svatantrika, they uphold the first and third positions, all of them. In their view, a hearer or solitary realizer arhat has eliminated all the afflictions of the three realms of cyclic existence, despite not having realized the absence of intrinsic existence. Such a realization, according to them, is in fact considered impossible because existence and intrinsic existence are regarded as synonymous. So only the Prasangika school says existence and intrinsic existence are impossible. The other schools say the opposite. And we feel that way. I can't stress it enough. That's why the other schools are so helpful. To us, when you really do the meditation on it, especially in the beginning, it's like, how is that even possible? Everything, this complicated world, how is it possible that it doesn't exist intrinsically, right? The lower schools would say, yeah, it exists because it exists intrinsically. Otherwise, it couldn't. So it's important to understand both. It's important to understand both. But whenever I hear that whenever I think about the fact that on one hand, nothing exists intrinsically and all this is possible, it seems contradictory, doesn't it? But then I'm thinking of like the little I've heard about modern physics. I don't know a thing about modern physics, but sometimes certain things come up in the news and I read a little bit. The idea that everything is made of subtle atoms and the space within the atoms and the actual, what's the opposite of space, non-space, I mean the actual matter in an atom, it's like it would fill, if you would take all the matter in, the solid matter in an atom, it would fill one football field. That's it, of all the atoms in this world. Whereas everything else is just space. Pardon?
If you take the space out.
If you took the space out, if you were to separate the matter in an atom, you could fit the matter of all the atoms in this world into one football field. That's nothing in comparison to and the rest is, how is that possible that this whole world looks so solid and full and, full of obstructions, etc. But in actuality, it's 99.9% space. So then if I think about that, I'm thinking, how is it possible that nothing exists intrinsically and all this is possible? And suddenly it feels like, it seems contradictory. So if one is not contradictory, maybe the other is not that contradictory either, although it feels that way. Do you get what I'm saying? Does that can you see that parallel? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so they definitely say it's impossible. A lack of intrinsic existence is impossible. Consequently, none of these schools. So that's so great that the opposing force is really strong, as of the tenet schools, right? All these other tenet schools totally oppose the Prasangika. It's actually a good thing, because the Prasangika are up against a very powerful tenet systems that are not stupid. They're not, like we say they have contradictory views, but they can totally justify what, from the Prasangika school point of view, we would call contradictions. They say, no, these are not contradictions. And actually, from our emotional state, we agree with them. From the point of view of our own emotions, like I said, I agree with those who assert intrinsic existence. I totally do. It feels right to me. Especially when I have certain emotions such as anger and attachment. Of course you're intrinsically bad when you upset me. Right? Yeah, I mean, that's how it feels when I'm angry with someone. Of course this person is intrinsically bad. Okay, anyway. Consequently, none of these schools endorses the second position, namely that not having realized the absence of intrinsic existence entails the continued presence of the afflictions associated with the three realms of samsara. While they accept that beings who have not yet attained liberation remain subject to these afflictive obstructions, they do not extend this claim to hera and solitary realizer arhats. They say you can still remove the afflictions. But what we analyze further as we continue on, what is the root of samsara? Are you kidding me? Believing someone to exist intrinsically does not give rise to anger? Right? Because actually, again, if we analyze it, our sense there's an intrinsic evil. Only if you believe someone is intrinsically evil can you resent them. If you believe I merely labeled them as it's not going to happen, right? I mean, we'll see. It's all going to come. I mean, this is, of course, part of what's to come. Therefore, since no Buddhist tenet school upholds all three positions of this consequence, none is subject to contradiction with respect to the three spheres. As with the first reasoning, the question thus arises, to whom is the consequence directed? Yeah. So again, the formal structure of the debate proceeds in a manner similar to that described in connection with the first reasoning. Furthermore, as in the case of the first reasoning, the second reasoning likewise gives rise to a debate as to whether it constitutes a consequence that can be reformulated as a correct syllogism. Okay. And now comes the third reasoning. Furthermore, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, by lacking the realization of suchness. Now, this is a little bit, we have to pay attention more. We have to pay more attention. So it gets more and more difficult. I mean, the first one was like so-so, the second one with the afflictions, okay. And now something else is introduced. Furthermore, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, by lacking the realization of suchness, would then objectify the aggregates of form and so on as real, and their minds would continue to be distorted. In that case, their realization of the selflessness of persons would be superficial and incomplete, for they would not have eradicated the mind that perceives the aggregate, the basis for conceiving self or personhood as real. This suggests that if one has not eradicated the object of apprehension in relation to grasping at the aggregates, the designated basis as real, one will also not have eradicated the object of apprehension in relation to grasping at the person who designated the designated attribute as real. In that case, Chandrakirti's text shows, since one would have not realized the person to be empty of true existence, one then would have also not realized genuine selflessness of persons in its entirety. Okay, I know this is a little difficult, but he's basically saying, you're saying there is no self, but you're not saying that about all other phenomena. How does that even work? Right? There's those who say, yeah, there is no self, no owner of mind and body and so forth, but everything else exists the way it appears to us. There are those who say that, those philosophers. So how can you say that about a self but ignore the rest? And then there are the other philosophers who say, okay, so there is something that applies to all phenomena, yes. Now, the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, the first two say there's only selflessness. They say nothing, they don't say anything about other phenomena. These are described here mainly. These are addressed here mainly. But you can also address the other philosophers who still insist that phenomena exist intrinsically, but they say something about the I. Of course, they deny that the self exists the way it appears, and then something very superficial about other things. Either they don't exist externally, or they don't exist without appearing to our mind. But that's still too coarse. That's not getting deep enough into the lack of intrinsic existence, right? It's not taking it all the way. So then how can you talk about selflessness if you don't go all the way with all the other phenomena? Say the body exists intrinsically, even say that the self exists intrinsically, but insist that you realize the subtlest selflessness. That's very coarse what you're realizing. That's in essence what Acharya Chandrakirti here is arguing. So explaining this passage extends the earlier arguments by introducing a third absurdity that would follow if hero and solitude realizers did not realize suchness or emptiness. Such practitioners would adhere to a philosophical position other than that of the Prasangika school, and as such assent to the tenet that the five aggregates, form, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and primary consciousness. It's not consciousness. It must be primary consciousness. This is why the five aggregates are really difficult to understand. I didn't even think of addressing this in the past.
The primary consciousness is free of afflictions, no?
No, it's a main mind.
It's a main mind.
Primary consciousness and main mind are the same thing, just different words. Namparchepa in Tibetan, or Tsosim, different words in Tibetan. So it means a primary mind, a main mind, because all the other ones are mental factors. So if consciousness was the fifth mental factor, why would you mention it? The mental factors are also consciousness. Why separate out consciousness if all the mental factors would be consciousness? But actually, these are contradictory. These the five aggregates we have. We have the body, number one. Then there's feeling and discrimination. These are mentioned separately. Then there is main mind, which is not a mental factor, main mind. And then there's this category in which you put all the other mental factors and the imprints. So why is feeling and discernment, or discrimination are mentioned separately? That's a whole different discussion, but we don't need to go into that here. But the point is, like, if you just say consciousness as the fifth aggregate, then all the mental factors, they're all consciousness. So why talk about feeling and discrimination separately when that is all consciousness? Then the 5 aggregates would not contradict each other, because feeling is a consciousness, discernment is a consciousness. Does that make sense? So it should be main mind. In Tibetan, it doesn't say shepa. Shepa means consciousness. It says number shepa. And number shepa means main mind. Means Dzogchen, or main mind. Yeah. So I started changing that now. We've said it for so many years now. The translations always talk about form, feeling, discrimination, composition of factors, and consciousness. Not consciousness, primary consciousness, or main mind. They exist intrinsically. So according to this position, everything exists intrinsically. However, as long as the aggregates are objectified as real, that is, held to exist intrinsically or objectively, the distorted mind that misconceives the self cannot be eliminated. As long as we perceive the aggregates to exist intrinsically, we have the same view about the self. So to believe we realize selflessness, subtle selflessness, it's not realistic. Why? Because the aggregates function as the basis upon which the self is imputed. So that would be like saying, I don't know, the parts of the self, they exist intrinsically, but the self doesn't. That doesn't make sense. They're parts of the self. Of course, they also don't accept that the self lacks intrinsic existence, but they say that they realize the most subtle selflessness. The subtlest selflessness would actually be the lack of intrinsic existence. That's the subtlest mode in terms of how the self exists. Saying the self doesn't exist as an owner of mind and body, that's very coarse. That's very coarse. But that the self cannot be found as one with the aggregates, separate of the aggregates. I'm not talking about an owner as such. It's nothing, even if you understand there's no owner, but there's nothing there that can be called self that is separate from being merely labeled, or being beyond, existing beyond being merely labeled. That can't be found. That's even deeper, isn't it? You understand there's no owner. Okay, no owner, fine, big deal, no owner. Okay, I can get that. No control, no owner. But then, once you understand that, there's still something there. It feels like there's still something there, right? It's not just labeled, there's still something there that is so precious. Yeah, so self-centeredness is still there. Accordingly, any understanding of the selflessness of persons that does not depend upon asserting the emptiness of the aggregates must be partial and superficial. Realizers may realize a coarser form of the selflessness of the I, they would still subscribe to a view that does not accord with reality. That's what the Prasangika school says. You're all not negating enough, right? So that's the difference between the Prasangika and the lower schools. They don't negate enough. As I said before, last time I think I did, attaining liberation, it's all a matter of negating things. Negating what's extra. We have to negate what's extra. We have to get rid of the afflictions, which are all exaggerated minds. It's actually very interesting. You don't find this in the texts, but there's an interesting kind of way to think about your emotions, the exaggerated version and the non-exaggerated version. I believe they all have a counterpart that is non-exaggerated. Right? When you think about, like, love is the counterpart to the balanced counterpart to attachment. Right? What is love? You love someone, you want them to be happy, and you love them for the good and the bad. What is attachment? It focuses only on the good. It exaggerates the good and focuses on me being happy. Oh, don't leave me, I can't live without you kind of idea, right? So it's not about the other person being happy, wanting the other person to be happy, seeing all their positive and negative qualities, seeing their potential, etc. No, in an exaggerated version, we exaggerate the positive part, and we're no longer focused on them. Now we're focused on ourselves. We want to don't want them to leave us. We want them to make me happy. So you see how this exaggeration comes in? Or anger. Well, what is the kind of balanced version? Seeing a mistake for a mistake, right? Without resentment, without the emotional response, but still saying, okay, this was wrong. Seeing it for what it is. And then possibly wanting to let the person know this was not okay, based on that understanding. No, here we have a strong emotional response in relation to they've done this to me, taking it personally and exaggerating the negativity, now having a strong emotional response that leads to, I don't know, wanting to beat them up or whatever. So you see, it's always that exaggeration. Why? Because in the beginning, we exaggerated how the person exists, intrinsically there. So that's what the Prasangika school here, through its ambassador, Acharya Chandrakirti, is saying. You're not denying enough. You're still having these exaggerating minds that can still function because you're just negating this owner thing. They actually negate something else, which will, when we discuss what are called the 16 aspects, I've listed them, all of them. Actually, I have the material already ready, but I have to still research a few things. I actually have everything until the last class, but I can't give it to you yet because I still have to research a few things. But in there, I already listed the 16 aspects, and we talk about another type of selflessness that hasn't come up, and nothing here. What's the other type of selflessness? The absence of a permanent, partless, independent self. We haven't discussed that to some degree, but it's quite interesting that there's an even coarser form of selflessness, right? That every Buddhist agrees with. And then you have the second, the subtle one, the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent I. It'll all be explained in more detail, and that's still too coarse. And then the subtlest is the Prasangika. So they're all taking us to a subtler and subtler level, but not all the way. Only the Prasangika does. So all the exaggerated minds that we have can only be eliminated if that deepest exaggeration, we refute that, we understand that that is impossible, really internalize it, and then we're able to get rid of all the other exaggerations. Get rid of anything that is extra in our mind, that's not in the nature of our mind. And that's where all the arguments come from. So I find the second is really powerful. You want to get rid of the afflictions? You have to go deeper. And you want to really fully understand how phenomena exist, the body and everything? You have to go deeper. You want to understand really how the self exists? You have to go deeper. That's the message Acharya Chandrakirti gives us here. So although they do talk about a coarser form of selflessness, they would still, this is 166, arhats would still subscribe to a view, if they were really arhats. Of course, the Prasangika school doesn't accept that they're arhats, if they only realize this coarse form of selflessness. But even if they were arhats, they would still subscribe to a view that does not accord with reality. They will still hold on to intrinsic existence. Since the aggregates are the designative basis of the self, failing to counteract the ignorance that apprehends them as intrinsically existence, leaves grasping at the I fundamentally intact. As long as you grasp at the self if your tenet, I mean, if from the point of view of what you assert, I'm saying in terms of your tenet, as long as you hold on to the aggregates as intrinsically existence, you can never, philosophically deny the self in a way that is efficient enough. The passage therefore draws an important implication. Without refuting, as a matter of tenet, the apprehended object of the mind that unrealistically grasps at the five aggregates, one cannot genuinely negate the apprehended object of the mind that unrealistically grasps at the self. Cannot. In other words, unless one accepts that the aggregates are empty of existing in an unrealistic way, one cannot fully realize that the self is likewise empty of existing in that way. Any purported realization of the selflessness of the I that does not rest upon the philosophical view that the aggregates are empty of true or intrinsic existence, therefore falls short of an authentic realization of selflessness. Makes sense, right? I mean, not that we know all the way what selflessness is, but at least the argument, the way the argument progresses. And then there's this quote from Lama Tsongkhapa in one of his most important texts that's quite difficult. It's called In the Essence of Eloquence on the Provisional and the Definitive. It's not really taught in the West. There's only one translation of this book available, which is ancient and very, very difficult to read. Honestly, I believe the Tibetan is easier to read than this ancient translation. It's by Bob Thurman, who's an amazing scholar, an amazing translator. But when he translated it way back, probably in the 80s, like 70s, I'm not sure, the language, the Buddhist language was still quite different. Oh my gosh, I don't understand it. Honestly, it's so hard. So the first translations were really, really difficult. Then when Jeffrey Hopkins started translating, he made it more accessible. And there's been a whole development now with the translations. I'm not always in agreement with. I was always a fan of Jeffrey Hopkins, to tell you the truth. And a lot of people criticize him because of his Buddhist hybrid English. But I find people who read Jeffrey Hopkins' books understand philosophy. If I talk to them, they understand it. So, okay, it doesn't sound like Shakespeare. I don't care. I mean, a book on mathematics doesn't sound like poetry either. Or a book on computers, you still have to use certain terminology. I would not use that as a light reading, but people understand. So I'm a huge fan. I never had the chance to thank him. I did actually once. I met him once and I thanked him. I always want to thank these incredible people. Like, honestly, without them, unfortunately, he passed some years ago. But what he did for us Westerners, using Western, amazing. And there's still Alex Berzin, who does so much for Buddhism. I also had the chance to thank him once, actually. Yeah, I can't thank them enough for what they've done. Incredible. Anyway, but there's this book, sorry, I kind of went off topic, but there's this book by Lama Tsongkhapa, really important, that is not studied enough in the West. Maybe that's my next project. Well, no, let's first finish this. I'm going to be busy for a long time. So anyway, if one asserts the intrinsic existence of phenomena as a matter of tenet, it is impossible for the realization of the selflessness of persons to arise. The Auto Commentary on Entering the Middle Way says, if one does not abandon grasping at the self of phenomena as a matter of tenet, I put it in brackets because that's what meant here. The selflessness of persons cannot be realized. For this reason, hearers and solitude realizers too must realize both types of selflessness. Okay. The third reasoning, therefore, this argument can be summarized in the following logical consequence, which constitutes the third of the three reasonings. I'm sorry, I'm going through it quickly because I think it's fine. I'm even thinking I've given too much explanation. But anyway, take the subject, a hearer or solitary realizer. It follows that they have not realized the selflessness of persons, as the lower schools would claim, because they're a being who regards the aggregates that serve as the basis of designation of the person as intrinsically existent. So no way they realize selflessness. Unlike the first and second reasonings, there's no separate example provided here. As with the previous reasonings, the third likewise raises the question as to whether it qualifies as a correct consequence, and if so, to which Buddhist tenet holder is directed. This in turn involves examining whether that tenet holder accepts the three positions and thus falls into direct contradiction with respect to the three spheres. Okay, the three positions are, I'm not going to read them. They're here cited again. But anyway. But again, none of the possible candidates for this consequence accepts all three positions. Okay. As before, they hold the first and the third, but not the pervasion. Okay. All right. As to the pervasion, and now I'm going through it a little bit quicker. I don't want to read everything. As to the pervasion, they do not maintain that viewing the five aggregates as intrinsically existent necessarily entails a failure to realize the selflessness of persons. Yeah, that's their main view. While they accept that an ordinary person who does not practice the Dharma is an example of someone who both regards the aggregates as intrinsically existent and has not yet attained such realizations, they hold that a hero, solitary realizer, arhat, nonetheless realizes the selflessness of persons. Okay, despite continuing to regard the aggregates as intrinsically existent. Okay, so therefore the debate is the same as in the first reasoning. You can debate it, which four tennis schools of the four Buddhist tennis schools incurs a direct contradiction, and the same reasoning can be applied to, is it a correct consequence or not? Can it be recited? Can it be reformulated as a syllogism or not? Okay, done. Sorry, I went through it really, really quickly because I think the first one I went through in so much detail, the rest is enough. Now, when you debate this, of course, you do spend more time on it. But I did debate it, and I knew we spent a lot of time on it. But as I told you, I wasn't the greatest fan of the debate. I was like, okay, correct syllogism or not. I wanted to get more to the juicy bits. Yeah, but still, I can see now how it was really helpful, but it's difficult to convey the importance here in this class, I suppose. But let's look at the next point. The third reasoning also sets the stage for a debate about the sequence or realization of the selflessness of phenomena and the selflessness of persons. So with the last syllogism, the whole argument was, of course, from the Prasangika school point of view, the lower schools claiming that they realize the subtlest type of selflessness is absurd, because that would mean you also deny the intrinsic existence of the aggregates. You have to deny the intrinsic existence of the person and of the aggregates. They equally lack intrinsic existence. And there's no difference in subtlety or coarseness. The lack of intrinsic existence of phenomena is not subtler or coarser than the lack of intrinsic existence of person. So that would mean, if they're not coarser or subtler, one is not easier than the other, in general, in terms of just denying their intrinsic existence. But the question still is there a sequence or not? What do you realize first? Do you have to realize one before the other? What do you think? Do you have to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of the body first, and then realize the lack of intrinsic existence of the eye? Or do you have to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of a table first? Or how does it work? What do you think?
I think it's more easy to realize it in the body because it's so near to you. So
Okay.
you can easily find this not there.
All right.
Because you know your body quite well.
Okay.
It's more near. So maybe that's...
Okay, so with the body, Doris is saying with the body, it seems easier, especially with modern science. It seems that, we know all the body parts now, their names, more names than they used to have, and then all their functions, etc. So if you're like a doctor, you probably know so much about the body. And then to say there's no body within the body, that may be easier. Okay. Okay, anyone else? Anyone who would think that it's easier to realize the lack of intrinsic existence of the eye? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, that's what I think, yeah.
Well, why? Why is that?
How to explain? I suppose when your awareness starts to arise and you start perceiving, and you start kind of questioning, oh, do I believe this, or where is this coming from? And when you start waking up, like when you're not so self-consumed and you're more aware, and you're like, oh, maybe there's just more than me. Maybe it's more like a connection, and there's more. And then you start questioning. It's like,
okay, let me just repeat what you're saying. I'm not sure I understand, but like because of our sense of I, who we are, and so forth, we're much more likely then, because we identify more with the I, right? More than with the body or the mind, possibly. So there's much more of a likelihood to question. It seems easier to just question, am I right the way I look at myself? Does that make sense or not? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, so it's almost you have to start questioning yourself before you start questioning anything else. So you start looking inward.
Yes.
And then you look inward and you're like, where is this coming from? Where is this response coming from? This emotional response or this action?
Right.
And then you're like, is this my behavior? Maybe it starts separating like your inner child, and then you're kind of
Okay. So like I'm best like analyzing where does that my reaction come from? So like
to the external reaction.
okay, so like where does that come from? Like the internal child or whatever. Like where I mean, like this is an interesting part that Craig just mentioned because there seem to be so many different aspects at play. Like the inner child that you mentioned, is that the same as the I, or just an inner child? Or the rational kind of Craig and the kind of, are these different people or just different minds with no Craig in charge? I mean, sometimes it feels like there's no one in charge. I certainly, you know, like when we say there's no that, I mean, I have no control over my mind. What does that even mean if there's no separate I? We talk like that, right? Mm-hmm. But it basically means there's just different minds doing their thing and I don't control, but then what is that I? There's no single mind that controls that whole thing, right? Yeah, it's fascinating. But I'm going to lead you through this right now. And how can I put this? Yeah, we may have opinions in this, but I think you'll be surprised. Some of the answers are quite different. I mean, what Doris says, I also said last time, yeah, with the table, it seems easier and so forth. But actually, strictly speaking, the answer is different. But let's see. And again, a lot of the answers give, of course, rise to debate, give rise to new thoughts. But maybe it's interesting what the texts actually say. First, what I did was, I first cited those scholars who say that first you have to realize the selflessness of phenomena before realizing the selflessness of person. And then I did it the other way around. And then I gave you the view of someone that makes a lot of sense to me, but still open for debate. Okay, so let's go through it. Some scholars hold that practitioners should first focus on realizing the selflessness of phenomena other than the person before realizing the selflessness of the person. So other than the person, I could put that in brackets actually, or in parentheses, because it's obvious what we mean. So other than the person before realizing the selflessness of the person. Oh, in this material also, I went through everything we did before. And I thought there was a mistake in the debate. When I thought there wasn't. I did it, read it again, so I didn't actually change it. But I did change a few things in the debate that you may notice to be a little bit more stricter in the debate format. Never mind, I don't think you're going to go back and read it, but just in case you wonder why it's different. Going back anyway to this here. So according to this position, phenomena here do not refer to any of the aggregates, such as the body, or to objects such as a vase or a table. Usually they say vase and pillar. It's not like really an everyday object, but I guess in Tibet they use vase and pillar. Because I suppose when you were in like a prayer hall studying all this, so there was always a vase, like a ritual vase, and there were always pillars to hold up the ceiling. So no surprise. Tables, I don't think they always had tables. I'm not sure. Now they do, but anyway, ordinary objects. Instead, they assert that it's easier to realize the selflessness of phenomena on the basis of an optical illusion, such as a reflection of a face in a mirror, a rainbow, or a mirage. These are just examples. A rainbow. They take these as like optical illusions. They're really optical illusions. They wouldn't call them that in Tibetan, but they're all optical illusions. They also have some auditory illusions, like echoes and stuff, but they're not necessarily mentioned unless they have a really long list. So the main one is the reflection in the face of a mirror. It's actually an optical illusion, isn't it? I mean, wouldn't you think so? Doesn't it appear as your face?
Yes,
but you know it's not your face. Yeah, that's right.
But it's more there than a rainbow when you come close.
Yeah, anyway, I explained both, the reflection in the face and the rainbow. I didn't go into the mirage. Yes, please.
What about the photo?
Yeah, what about a photo? That's really, yeah, a photo is exactly, it's another good example. They didn't have those then, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, a photo. It's another good example. Yes. So definitely optical illusions, there's so many of them. Just go online, optical illusions, they're great. Auditory illusions, you probably have to listen to a recording, but then going online, there's so many of them. Really fascinating. But the explanation given here is pretty much the same for all of them, except that they work slightly differently. So a mirage, since they hold that such a phenomenon can serve as a suitable basis for initially gaining a realization of emptiness. So before you even tackle other things, and person, for instance, so the reasoning is that it's easier to recognize the absence of intrinsic or objective existence in such phenomena because their deceptive nature is comparatively obvious to us. When we look into a mirror, the face appearing in the mirror does not merely seem to exist, it appears to be an actual face located behind or within the surface of the mirror. We don't remember the time we first saw a mirror, right? We were children, and we were probably, I've seen, toddlers talking to themselves in the mirror, getting angry at the other person. I've even, like my mom's cats, I waited for that moment. My mom, she moved now, but where she used to live before, she had a huge mirror that didn't have any borders. It was like the whole wall was actually just mirror, and I waited for her little kittens to first see that mirror, and I just happened to be there because I knew they're going to get it wrong. I mean, usually, you do. And so I remember the first of them going for like a few minutes before kind of looking again, and now they walk past mirrors, no problem. So that was definitely someone being fooled, and I usually give the example of me being fooled by a mirror. Years ago, my mom took a trip with some friends around India, and I happened to come to Delhi, and I met her in Delhi. And they stayed in a really nice hotel, kind of a fancy entrance hall and stuff. So I remember there were mirrors everywhere because I made it even look bigger. And this one mirror I was walking towards, it was actually the edges were covered by plants, so I couldn't see it was a mirror. And so as I was walking towards it, it looked like the hole I was just coming from was just extended endlessly. And I'm like, oh, there's another nun. How unexpected. So I saw another nun walking towards me, and that was unexpected in that place. So there I was, actually having a wrong consciousness. It was myself walking towards myself. So having a wrong consciousness, it wasn't just an appearance that seemed to be this nun walking towards me. So it doesn't just happen to babies and cats, it also happens to me. Okay, so yet when we investigate, we recognize that no such face, they always talk about the face in the mirror. They don't talk about, maybe they didn't have whole body mirrors in India and Tibet at the time, I'm not sure. So yet when we investigate, we recognize that no such face can be found there. The appearance exists because something does appear. The appearance is definitely there. However, the appearance deceives us regarding the manner in which it exists. What appears to be an independently existing face is in reality merely a reflection arising in dependence upon numerous factors, such as the face being reflected, the mirror, light, and the observer's position. Right? So all these factors that come together, and based on that, something appears. When engaging in ultimate analysis of such a reflection by searching for it as something that exists separate from its parts, or basis of designation as one with them, or as existing among them, practitioners will not be able to identify it and thereby come to realize its emptiness. So you understand first, it doesn't exist the way it appears, it only appears in, and then you go deeper basically on that kind of deceiving appearance, or deceptful? No, that's not a word. Deceptive, right, thank you. This deceptive appearance, and then you go deeper. Well, not only does it appear to be a face and it's not, what about it existing as an intrinsic phenomenon, an intrinsically existent phenomenon beyond its basis of designation, cannot be found It does seem to exist objectively and intrinsically, but when you look for it, you can't find it. So you realize it's selflessness or emptiness. And since it's not a person, it's a phenomenon, you realize now emptiness on the basis of that. Doesn't that make sense? Right? Yeah, so there's still room for debate, but this is just one view. The same applies to a rainbow. What about rainbows? They're a little different. Here it's more the location. Well, the location in both cases is important. But the same can be said about a rainbow. A rainbow appears to possess a substantial existence with distinct colors arranged in a particular location in the sky. Yet when we try to approach it or determine its exact location, we find that it cannot be identified in the way it first appeared. Not that you need to explain this, of course you know, but I'm just getting you through the thing you're investigating, a rainbow, how it appears so solidly, and then when you investigate, well, cannot be found. It cannot be identified in the way it first appeared. The rainbow does exist conventionally, but it does not exist as an independently established object, objectively established, I should maybe say, even better than independently, independently or objectively established object. It's so highly subjective, isn't it? If you think about it. Occupying a fixed location. Rather, it arises in dependence upon, well, sunlight, water droplets, atmospheric conditions, and the position of the observer. I had to put that up, look that up, the atmospheric conditions. Not that I knew that, but anyway. If any of these conditions change, the rainbow changes or disappears, as we all know. When engaging in ultimate analysis of such a rainbow by searching for it as something that exists separate from its basis of designation as one with the doors existing among its parts, practitioners likewise come to realize its emptiness. Right? So it really seems there are two stages to it. First, that more obvious deceptiveness of these appearances, existing one way, but appearing one way, but existing in a different way, and only because, well, it depends on causes and conditions. That's why it appears. And then when we go deeper, well, not only does it not exist as that solid, fixed phenomenon, it cannot be even found among its basis of labeling. So, therefore, you can realize the emptiness on the basis of that object. Since the discrepancy between appearance and reality is relatively easy to recognize in such cases, proponents of this approach maintain that they provide a suitable object for initially cultivating insight into emptiness. According to this view, a practitioner first develops conviction that such a phenomenon does not exist from its own side, objectively or intrinsically, despite appearing that way, and then through repeated familiarization, when you're repeatedly, first you're convinced, all right, cannot be found, etc. Then through repeated familiarization with this view, then the practitioner gradually gains a deeper understanding of the distinction between appearance and reality, and eventually realizes emptiness with respect to that phenomenon. Can you see that progressive kind of, okay. Only afterward is this understanding extended to more difficult objects of analysis that are considered to be more difficult, especially the person, right? So other objects, you can take other objects, and then you take the person. The reasoning is that if practitioners have already gained certainty that a vivid appearance, such as a reflection or rainbow, does not exist in the way it appears, they're better prepared to investigate whether the same is true of the self. Right? So here, in terms of, the reflection not appearing as a face, the rainbow not appearing as an actual fixed object, but also not appearing, the face not appearing, face not existing as something existing intrinsically. So that face in the mirror, that reflection, well, it appears to exist intrinsically, but it doesn't. Taking it to that level, and the same is true for the rainbow. So you're better prepared to investigate whether the same is true of the self. At that point, practitioners turn to the eye and examine whether it can be found as something existing from its own side, independent of mere designation. So something beyond just being called eye. Is there an eye? I keep saying I keep thinking I, right? In whatever language. There is a language where they don't have the word I, by the way. Forget which language that is. There is a language, I read about it. There is a language where they don't have the word I. And so, yeah, there's a much I mean, they do still talk about themselves, but if they don't have a word as such, I'm pretty sure they still have the concept of themselves, but language does kind of, what's the word? Strengthen that sense, doesn't it? Right? If we have a word for something, yeah, then we are much more likely to understand it better, surely. Which is also interesting, I wanted to say. We do need to have a healthy sense of identity before we should actually deal with selflessness. Isn't that interesting? You have to have a healthy sense. So emptiness is not for someone who has a problem with identity and so forth. It can potentially be dangerous. Yes, please.
What's the healthy sense?
What is a healthy sense? That is a nasty question. Yeah, I wonder myself. But you know, like it's really like what is healthy anyway? It's in relation to a Buddha. We don't have a healthy sense of an I, but in relation to most people, I suppose, I think it's a bit like when the Buddha taught. He taught to, in general, you know, to the general population, in the sense of like most people don't have such a sense, what could that be? I was wondering about that myself. For instance, someone who hates themselves a lot, maybe like someone who really hates themselves, very, very low self-esteem, that probably wouldn't be a good way, because you already hate yourself and then you're told you're not even there. Great. Right? It's kind of like you feel like you disappear. Sometimes people have that sense they're not there, and with other people they don't get appreciated. They've not been loved to such a degree that they feel like they're invisible. And then they're told it doesn't. That is no. I think that would be too difficult to take. So a certain degree of self-confidence needs to be there. I was also wondering. I've heard of people who have no short-term memory. There's this condition where people, like, every moment they forget. So
Aphasia. It's called aphasia.
aphasia. Oh, aphasia. There's a word for it. Oh, great. Thank you. So having aphasia. Now, how can you build a sense of identity? Because our identity is a continuation, right? Every moment we remember our interaction with other people. We remember being successful. We remember having failed. Based on that, we go over that again and again. And that labeling, those thoughts we constantly have, they create our identity, our conventional identity. But if you don't have that short-term memory, maybe if you have long-term memory, but what that means is like maybe a 5-year-old I, that doesn't really help if you're now an adult to create a memory. Yes?
So how do you know whether to like look towards the emptiness of the self versus sort of create this stable, healthy identity through metta or other practices?
Okay, how do you know? His question is whether you should look into emptiness on one hand, and on the other hand, to focus more on metta, on love, and so forth.
And I can give an example.
Yes, please.
Just,
Give an example, yeah.
I think I experience the most ease when I'm not really aware of myself.
Yes,
And with your voice and with the painting on the wall,
right.
it's not solid.
Okay.
But then other times I have this beautiful self-esteem after doing metta when I'm giving myself love. There's an
Right.
image of my head. This
Yes,
long
yes, yes,
guy,
yes,
right,
yes, yes,
that
yes.
is all solid.
Oh, right, right,
And
right.
it's a balance because both kind of make me feel relaxed. And
Ah,
I don't know which to dance into. And sometimes when I do metta, I get scared that I'm building an illusion of self.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So what he said, what's your name?
Thai.
Ty. T-Y?
T1.
It's easy to spell. So Ty is saying that he gave an example, which I think I really understand what he's talking about. So sometimes he says when he listens to, for instance, to the session here, so listen to the voice and then thinking of the, perceiving this voice and perceiving the paint on the wall and so forth. There's no sense of I. It's just there's no strong sense, it's just listening and seeing something. And at other times when he meditates on metta, on loving kindness, there's a sense of this I that's actually being meditating, the sense of identity, like a healthy sense of identity that gives him comfort. In both cases, there's comfort. So therefore, there's also sometimes the worry that when you meditate on metta too much, you're giving up too much kind of thing, right? Like you're losing yourself kind of thing too much.
Sometimes like I'm building myself.
Oh, you're building yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you're building yourself. It's not natural.
Going the wrong way.
Oh, it's not.
Other way from emptiness.
Oh, right. So you're building something that's not there. It's kind of not natural.
Right.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's really practical. That's very good to think along these lines. Anyone else who would like to add something to that? Because I think it's an important.
No, I just love. I have perfect balance.
You said he has the perfect balance?
No.
Oh.
Neither.
Right.
No, I think it's a great question.
It's a good question. I agree, because it's like, what does selflessness even mean? I mean, it's also really important because it seems like you're giving up yourself to a certain degree when actually it's not. So there's this fine balance. And actually, I think both are important. Metta, that's why they talk about method and wisdom. Method and wisdom. If you just did wisdom, I think you could go crazy. I don't know. It's like this is just wisdom is too cold. I wonder. I've heard sometimes there were these philosophers of the past, and they really analyzed the self and analyzed the self and analyzed. And then you hear that I've heard of one who killed himself. Now I don't know what conclusion they came to, but I don't think it was balanced with love and compassion. I think that's a very important balance. Those two go hand in hand. They describe them as the two wings of a bird. So if you analyze the self like, oh, I can't find it, then that feels like scary, actually. Like a lot of people say they feel that is scary. And then you develop love and compassion. Your mind is filled with that beautiful feeling of love and compassion that, just kind of fills the mind, fills the person. And then that sense of like emptiness in the negative sense, right? I mean, the word has such a negative connotation in the West. It's terrible that we're actually using a word that, oh, the emptiness in my life. It's not, it's not a happy statement when this is one of the most important concepts. But of course, by now, I think we understand that it's not the kind of emptiness or senselessness or meaninglessness that we may talk about when we talk about emptiness. But the point is, yes, so in order to not fall into the misperception that emptiness means meaninglessness, then love comes in. Because love gives it meaning. Love and compassion, they bring meaning in the whole thing. And in fact, they support each other. Because if I don't exist as solidly and concretely as I believe I do, then my sense of preciousness and obsession with myself will be reduced, and I can dedicate my energy more towards others. It gives me space. I don't have to worry about the self all the time, because it's not done with worrying about the I. I worry about my success, my reputation, my popularity, my being praised, and so forth. That's what we worry about. And we're so occupied with that, I don't have time for love, excuse me. I have a career to look at, kind of thing, right? So that's an important question. And then to balance it out again, because of course that love, the ego can come in easily. So I think that's what he meant with unnatural. Now the self-centered mind, the self-centered mind, and of course our tendency to see things as more concrete than they are, kind of creeps into our love, and that naturalness disappears and it becomes too concrete. That's when you need to go back, right? So to balance it, where's that I? Where's the I? Is it really there? Of course the I exists. Of course the I exists. This is very mean that they use words that seem to suggest there's no I. Selflessness. It's not saying there's no self. It's mean, isn't it? They did that on purpose. I mean, they use the word da means self, me means no self. Da can also mean owner, etc., but never mind. Here, da actually means no self, me. But it's a special kind of self that they're negating, not self in general. Not self in general. Of course, there's an I. Pinch yourself, right? If it feels like, who's generating love in that moment, if not the self? So it's just talking about an intrinsic self or an owner that exists separate from mind and body. Yeah. But an important practical question. Yeah.
Do I have time for one more question?
Of course.
off this? So when I practice metta,
Yeah.
I have this sort of harmonious self,
Right.
stable.
Yes.
When someone insults me after,
Yes.
it's like there's not something here for it to hook onto.
Oh, nice.
Which is ironic because you think if I practice more thinking about myself,
Yes.
then there's this solid self and an insult would hook it.
Right.
But for some reason, the more compassion I have, the more empty I feel.
The more compassion, because you,
Which is weird.
when you, well, your love is not just focused on yourself, it's also on others.
Yeah.
And that is already a counter movement to the self-centered mind, right? That's why love makes sense from a Buddhist point of view. Why is love important? Because it's rooted in reality, while self-centeredness is not rooted in reality. That is why love and compassion can grow endlessly. In other words, you can love every living being spontaneously, anyone you meet on the street, endlessly. There's no limit. Oh, this person I can love, but not that. But you can't hate everyone. You can't. I mean, you can kind of think, I hate everyone, but that is not hating everyone. That everyone you meet, you go, oh, I hate him. I hate him too. You'll be too exhausted by number 3. And usually people, they hate one person, and then someone else does something bad, so their hatred of that one person subsides, and they give all their energy to hating the other one, right? So that's interesting. It is exhausting. It is suffering to hate someone, right? You don't feel peaceful, etc. But on top of that, you can't hate everyone because the mind is not rooted in reality, whereas love and compassion is rooted in reality. And when you meditate on love and compassion, when someone insults you, well, first of all, you've already included them in your love, so it's harder, but also because you forget about yourself in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they're not as separate.
No, they're not separate. They support each other.
Yeah.
They're not as separate. Not only are they not as separate, they're totally in harmony with each other. So if you want to increase your love, focus more on selflessness. If you want to increase your understanding of selflessness, focus more on love. Like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, what does he say? I do 2 things in the morning. I meditate on emptiness and bodhicitta, which is just another way of saying I meditate on emptiness and on love. We need both. Yeah. You can alternate them quickly. In one session, a little bit of love, a little bit of emptiness, a little bit. Good idea, actually. Yes.
I was just gonna say, like you were saying, wisdom and compassion are like the wings of a bird. Is it like when the bird's kind of falling too far, you balance with the other one, like to keep afloat?
Oh.
Say that.
I haven't seen a kind of bird like that. Oops. Oh, not too much. Oh, closer to the earth. That is an interesting bird. Actually, I said that before, actually, in one of the classes, but I don't know you were here at that time. For the longest time, I had this stupid, unrealistic version of a bird, because in the sutric system, you cannot practice love and wisdom or method and wisdom in one mind. So you either practice one or the other. You can alternate quickly, but you can't put them bring them together in one mind. Only in Tantra you can. But because they use the bird, I was thinking, oh, you use this wing and that wing and this wing and that wing. Kind of like in my mind, this is how a bird flies. And then I said that in class and someone said, no, this is not how a bird flies. I mean, how silly my version of a bird. Like, you know, they do it both at the same time. So that's kind of the tantric version, I suppose.
They lean, right? They lean.
That's true.
Swoop.
So when
like
yeah.
rebalance, maybe you need to
Yeah,
lean.
you're right. But you're absolutely right. It's still a beautiful example when you just kind of them like soaring in the sky, right? Not like moving their wings, but soaring in the sky. If they kind of use one wing more, then they have to eventually use the other one. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, because you get out of balance. And that is important here. Method and wisdom, you need a balance. Right? We need a balance. Yeah, great. That's very good. I did remember to look in the group, and I did see some questions. Anesthetized. Oh, Georgina, thank you. Anesthesia. Okay, Rika asks, is everything that appears in our mind a meaning generality? Are, for example, memories a meaning generality of something that happened in the past, and as that permanent? All right, this goes back to conceptual mind. I think it's important. This is an important idea. It's part of understanding the mind better. And of course, the study of philosophy is all a study of the mind. Well, actually, the meaning generality, when we have a memory, we do remember the actual event. Both appear to the mind. Let's take the breakfast in the morning. We're not saying that the actual breakfast doesn't appear. It does appear. Then otherwise we would only take to mind the meaning generality. First of all, we know breakfast, or we know the breakfast we had in the morning. We can identify its color and so forth. Secondly, not only do we know what we had for breakfast based on our memory, that breakfast also appears, but it appears mixed with that meaning generality. It appears mixed with that meaning generality. So sometimes they say it's like putting a veil, let's say, over this cup. If I put a veil over the cup, the veil is like the meaning generality. It covers, because the cup, I cannot directly take to mind the cup because it's not in front of me. I have no way to access it other than through this meaning generality. That is like a veil, but you can still see the cup through it. Let's say you have like a white veil, like cheesecloth. Not as elegant like as a veil, but like a cheesecloth. You can look through it. So the meaning generality is like the cheesecloth that covers the cup. But you still see the cup, just not as clearly. So the meaning generality, because it's merely a negation of what is not the main characteristics of your breakfast, doesn't come with the same vividness. Now think of a movie. Have you noticed in movies when the person, I don't know, the main character remembers the past, either it's black and white or it's in like this hazy quality. It's not as sharp, right? It's kind of hazy. So black and white or hazy. That shows the meaning generality. The meaning generality, so there's still the past event, it still appears. So you still have an appearance of the past event, that appears. But through the meaning generality, through the veil or the cheesecloth of the meaning generality, so it still appears, but not with the same vividness. They appear as mixed, they say. They appear as mixed. The object itself, so just as the veil, since it covers the cup, it's, okay, in this case, it covers it. They're not mixed as such. But if you were to mix the cup with the, right, or mix is the wrong word. But you kind of, for you, like on top of the cheesecloth, it's kind of like you don't really separate the cheesecloth from the cup. They all appear in one as one entity. So similarly here, you have that meaning generality based on your imprints that were left on the mind that conjure up that image, which is just the opposite of what is not the thing that you're thinking of. And then together with that, you're thinking of the actual thing, and they appear mixed.
I never got it.
No?
I heard that so many times, I never understood.
No, because...
That we can still see the real thing.
Yeah, but because otherwise... Yeah, I know, because they appear mixed, we don't know.
Right.
Because they appear mixed. If you mix water and milk, can you still see the water? No. So who is to tell us? The Buddha tells us they appear as mixed, but not from our own experience. It doesn't appear to me. What appears to me is just a very coarse version of my breakfast.
Yeah, there's no clarity.
There's no detail. There's no detail, exactly. But otherwise, if my breakfast didn't appear, how could I know my breakfast? So the Buddha tells us basically the breakfast also appears, but I'm not aware of that. So when you say you don't get it, you're saying exactly what I say. I have no experience of that. I'm only aware of that appearance that lacks detail. Right? Does that make sense? So it's not like we can kind of go back and say, oh yeah, there's the actual breakfast and there's the meaning generality. That can't happen because they appear like mixed. They appear like the mixture of water and milk. But you don't see the water, you don't see the milk. I mean, it's not like you're able to see them separately. You can't. You just know it's a mixture. Well, you can kind of tell the quality of you can tell by the quality of the milk if someone mixed it with water. So here you can tell by the quality of the appearance. It's mixed with the meaning generality, but the actual thing no longer appears clearly. No way. Yeah. But when I ask you, I mean, the experiment I usually ask people to do, whatever you see in front of you, let's say the wall, I see this wall, you see the opposite, you see the wall behind me. I ask you, look at the wall. Do you perceive the wall very clearly and vividly? You would all say yes. And I say, continue looking in that direction. Just close your eyes and think of the wall. And what happens? It appears. But are you thinking about the wall? Is the wall appearing? To say it's not appearing would be ridiculous. It does appear, but in a very coarse way. It lacks all the vividness, it lacks all the detail. Well, welcome to your meaning generality, right? That is also the mind allows for that to appear. What the opposite of not being wall means to you appears, and through that you access the wall. So through that the wall also appears. But now it appears mixed, just as water doesn't appear as clean as it would if there was milk in it. Or just as milk wouldn't appear as whitish as it would if water is mixed with it. But it would be wrong to say it doesn't appear. Because you can't perceive something without, if your main object is the wall, it can only be perceived if it appears to you. Your main object is the wall, right? So if your main object is the wall, a mind cannot perceive something that doesn't appear to it. Its main object. It cannot perceive its main object without, that's what it pays attention to. So that cannot, so it can only appear, and it does, you can say things about it, but through the meaning generality. Yeah. So some would maybe say the object actually doesn't appear. Some would maybe say that, because we have no proof that the actual thing appears. Yeah, well, through the meaning generality, maybe that's enough. I don't know. Yeah, I see why Venerable Kumbhila has that doubt. Yeah, it makes sense. I've just accepted it. I've just accepted this other appearance is there. I'm not aware of it because Buddha said so. Maybe one day I realize it. Yeah, I don't know. But good question, important question. Okay, great. Let me see. Okay, then Venerable Yangdren asks, concerning a healthy mind, a teacher once said that one has to have something properly in order to lose it or to give it up. Yeah, the sense of self, like a strong sense of self in order to be able to give it up. Maybe an unhealthy mind would be sort of shattered to some degree, not whole. Yeah, sometimes we have that sense, I'm just I mean, we have that sense, right? I remember definitely being a teenager and hormones and stuff, like finding your own identity. I don't think that would have been a good time to think about emptiness. I certainly didn't feel whole. I felt shattered. Who am I? I don't know, kind of thing. So not easy to give up that up, as one needs to bring it back together first, repair it. One cannot give up parts only. One cannot just give up parts. So the whole thing is actually given up, right? So therefore, if you feel shattered, yeah. I mean, I think what it needs to also be a sense of ease with yourself. Be at ease with yourself. Grounded. You have to feel grounded and ease at yourself. Because oftentimes when you have a problem with your own identity, there is also like resentment towards ourselves, and that's the problem. Yeah, Love, again, very important. It has to include, of course, also the self. And we can't love others, really, if we don't love ourselves. So that's one of the first things we need to learn. Alan, go ahead. Last question.
Talks about fear.
Yeah.
Ever fear. Fear in itself.
Fear in itself. Oh, what about fear?
Well, you won't be able to reach anywhere if you have any form of fear.
Oh, that's true. Alan makes a very good point. Fear. Yeah, Alan is very right. If fear kind of prevents you from looking at certain things.
Any type of fear.
Any type of fear. Yeah, any type of fear. The fear of mice, but that prevents you from looking at the self. Or maybe just the tendency to have fear of anything unknown that could actually, be translated into the fear of the unknown, for instance. Yeah, fear is interesting. Although, from point of view, there is fear sometimes encouraged. Yeah, fear of suffering. They say, but I think it's a very specific type of fear. It's a very rational type of fear. It's not a paralyzing fear, right? I mean, fear of, I don't know, falling down an abyss, for instance. That's not a kind of fear that keeps me up at night, but that keeps me attentive as I'm walking on a small path. That's a good kind of fear, isn't it? But it doesn't freak me out. It protects me. But I think Alan is more talking about a kind of an overwhelming fear, or sometimes irrational fear as well.
He gives a couple of examples. I can't remember all of them, but one of them is death, for example.
Fear of death. Okay. Right, a fear of death. Yeah, if you have a fear of death, then you're probably more likely to have a fear of lack of intrinsic existence, right? Because it's fear of giving up the familiar. Even if you accept a reincarnation, if you don't accept reincarnation and you think the death just means the non-existence of yourself, then of course it's very scary, nothingness. But even if you believe in reincarnation, because obviously I have to give up my body, I have to give up my possessions, I have to leave everything I know right now that I remember, I have to give that up, that is scary. And that kind of fear, again, is very interesting because focusing on the self, I'm actually giving up my sense of I. That, of course, is afflicted, but that's all I know. So yeah, fear of the unknown is very true. And that's what they say. When you first reflect on emptiness, there's fear. Seen as a good type of fear, you're moving in the right direction. But do you move beyond that fear or not? It's a different matter. So I think Alan makes a very good point here. Fear is a huge obstacle. Yeah, very big obstacle. I mean, fear of practicing the Dharma, fear of renunciation. I mean, okay, that's misunderstanding renunciation. It's actually a natural process that one day you feel, oh, I don't need this. And you happily give it up because you see it as a burden. Renunciation doesn't mean, oh, you have to shave your head now or give up all your stuff. No, that's not renunciation. It's only when you feel like, oh, it's a burden. I don't want all this. That's renunciation in the sense of of material goods. Anyway, great. There were some really good discussions. Thank you for everyone online and, of course, everyone here. So let's take a moment to dedicate all the virtues, all the positive potential we've accumulated by reciting the prayers. In the snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Denzing Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you.